This is the way losers acting around misfits. Pound for pound, I'm the listing. You can bounce and get dismissed. Clown, get this. Couldn't walk a mile wearing my Fitbit. Competition is non-existent.
Welcome to Three Count Commentaries. So our good friend Andrew Yang has decided it's grifting season again. It's time to attack WWE. The tweet was pretty simple. He just says if you're a former or current independent contractor signed to WWE and you feel like you've been misaligned in your independent contractor status, to contact his good friend Lucas Middlebrook, who is a union attorney and is, I guess, trying to unionize WWE once again. For the third time in one calendar year, WWE has been dealing with the quote-unquote union problem. And this is the second time they've had to deal with Andrew Yang, who, of course, conveniently forgot all about this nonsense when he didn't become labor Department of Labor head under Joe Biden. Of course, this is after he also failed to become mayor of New York. So this is a guy who's a perennial loser, who whenever he needs public attention for something, he knows he can hit that wrestling vein, and all the marks, especially all the marked blue check marks, will jump all over it. I've done numerous videos on things like unions. I've done innumerable videos about things like unions. I will put those in the description for all the new subscribers, so I don't want to go over them in detail again. But if you don't want to sit down and listen to those whole videos, this is what I'll do. I'll say that I don't like unions. I worked in union shops. I don't like them. Now, some people will say, well, it should be a union like SAG-AFTRA. And I've gone through detail about SAG-AFTRA contracts, which are absolute garbage. Let's be frank and forward. The way that the union contracts work, the SAG-AFTRA contracts, is it makes the union a monopoly on labor. That's how it works. You can't work outside the union, and you can't work in the union unless you're under union contract. In other words, they control what you can and can't do. You don't. As an independent contractor, you can sign away your rights and then retain those rights. In this situation, if you were to say, hey, the union exists, I don't want to be in the union, guess what? They will block you from working. That's how it works. Because, and for anybody who will say, well, that's not how it works, Mongo. Yes, it is. Because the union needs to have solidarity. If there is no solidarity within the union membership, then there is no point of the union. So that means everybody who works in the shop has to be in the union. That's how it works. It is mandated. You must be in the union. If you don't want to be, that means you don't want to work here. And it works that way in Hollywood. It works that way everywhere. So what ends up happening once they create these unions? Well, because unions come with all of the benefits that you hear about, well, some of them do, except for SAG-AFTRA, who turned off a lot of the benefits for their quote employees during the pandemic, which of course none of these people who were blowing SAG-AFTRA online dared to stop and talk about. But yes, they cut off some of the benefits from some of their contracted talent during the pandemic. WWE released talent, so I guess it's fair, right? So here's the thing. In unions, you have to pay to work in a place. You have to pay dues. So that means you have to pay somebody to work in a place that you must sign on with them to work. And then in SAG-AFTRA, you cannot work in non-union shops. If you want to go work for, it's even detailed. In some instances, you can't work a small play somewhere if you want to. If that place is not under SAG-AFTRA union, you can't do it. That's almost complete control over your life. So if you're one of these people complaining about WWE contracts right now, SAG-AFTRA is really no different. It's really no different. You talk about people having complete control over everything you say and do. These organizations do. The NFL does, the NBA does, SAG-AFTRA does. These things are not as cut and dried as you think. The point of all of this stuff, it's the same thing they did it with Uber and Lyft. The same reason they go after them. It's the same reason they go after Airbnbs. It's because They want the tax money and they want the money. Democrats only care about money. Now, I'm not a Republican. I'm a libertarian. If I'm a small L libertarian, I'm not a Libertarian Party libertarian, because the Libertarian Party sucks. The big picture here is that Democrats get a lot of money from unions. Andrew Yang is a Democrat. He wants to get in contract with a union lawyer. Why? Because they want unions to benefit from an industry that they have not yet benefited from. They want that. They have almost complete control. That's why they push, Colin Kaepernick and all these different people who are signed to these unions, because union labor funds the Democratic Party. So no, this is not about health care for the pro wrestlers. Nobody cares about all the football players and basketball players that end up going broke within 5 or 10 years after their retirement. Nobody cares. People, as a matter of fact, they just kind of shh and walk away. So anytime you hear about, well, we just trying to get good health care for the players, and I'm tired of seeing all my heroes broke and poor. Yeah, and then when you see like this football player who played 5 or 6 years in the NBA and the NFL, then 2 years after he leaves the league, because either he got booted out because he wasn't good enough anymore, or he got injured and he ends up going broke, everybody just kind of is like, well, whatever. It's the exact same thing. Unions do not protect against most of the issues that you're arguing about. The second thing is, these wrestlers are very, very, very difficult to provide health care costs to, because they go through such concussive force with every fall. In order to make wrestling safe enough for insurance companies to take wrestlers in mass, you're going to have to make the business incredibly safe, much, much safer than it is now. So, WWE has done something when it comes to trying to make the industry safer. So there's no chair shots to the head, no power drivers, that kind of stuff. But then they would try to use that against them by saying they're controlling the way that they do the work. By saying you can't hit somebody in the head with a steel chair, you're controlling their behavior. Therefore, they're not really independent contractors, they're employees. I say that's bullshit, because what you're trying to do is stop them from getting concussions. And breaking their neck, obviously, right? But then they'll try to use that against them by saying that amount of control means that you should be looking at them as employees. It's nonsense. But ultimately, none of this matters, because according to law, you cannot interfere with other people's contracts, which is what Andrew Yang is trying to do. So what has to happen is somebody has to initiate. In other words, somebody from within the WWE, some contractor performer, or somebody from outside, has to contact this attorney, just like they had to contact SAG-AFTRA when they went through the whole thing with Zelina Vega. These people cannot do anything unless somebody complains. So until somebody complains, this is nothing. It's just Andrew Yang grandstanding, looking for a win because he's a political loser. That's the entire point. So as long as nobody complains, this is nothing. This is a nothing burger. It's great for cage size seats and bodyslam.net and PW Insider and Slam Wrestling and everybody who wants the business to be unionized, not realizing that it'll really shrink a lot of the businesses. If that was the case, the business would shrink, because that's what unions do. The point of unions is to shrink the business, to be a protectorate. That's the point. So, if that's the point, how can you have 50,000 pro wrestlers? That would drive down the cost of labor. So what you want to do is you want to have 50 pro wrestlers. That drives up the cost of labor. And that's with anything, hospitals. That's why you need to have licenses. When you talk about licensing laws, this is what the purpose of a license is to limit the amount of people in the labor pool. You limit the labor pool, you increase the cost. You have to have a license to be a barber. So then the barber who went through spent all this money trying to get a license, now he has to pay it back. He's going to up his price because he's a licensed barber. The license is the difference between his cost. It's the same thing with law schools. You have to become a licensed attorney. Therefore, there are few attorneys. Therefore, the cost of attorneys are high. The cost of doctors are high. The American Medical Association is just a union. The state bar is just a union. That's really all of these things are. Okay? They increase the cost of things. They try to keep the labor low. So if you are a wrestling fan and you want to see more wrestlers, then you shouldn't want a union, because you should want other people to have opportunities. In a market where you're ultimately trying to limit opportunities, you're going to have fewer wrestlers. And since wrestling is different from football, baseball, and basketball, where you can age out of those leagues, you can age out of the NFL at 30, right? Because you've been in the league about, what, 8 years at that point? You can age out at 32, 33. At 32 or 33, you just getting good as a wrestler. So that means you're going to be under contract for the next, who knows how long. You can work until you're 70. Ric Flair was still working. Guys like, Terry Funk and Jerry Lawler still was taking matches. So that means that the talent pool isn't refreshing the way that the way the other sports are, right? Because there aren't no 50-year-old NFL players. It's just not going to happen. You're a freak if you're still playing at 40. In wrestling, if you're 40, you're barely getting started. You're near the tail end, sure, but you're really, after years and years and years of, being beat up, yeah, you're going to be a little bit slower. But it's not nearly the same thing. You're out of the league usually if you're an NBA player or NFL player. Pro wrestling is not the same. So limiting options damages especially young people in this particular situation. But Andrew Yang does not care. What he's looking at is this is an attempt to, instead of trying to get individual donations from professional wrestlers, you create one big pool and you forcefully say, hey, pro wrestling union, give us money. So now all the libertarian and or Republican pro wrestlers now are going to be paying taxes, and not just taxes, but paying dues to an organization that then goes against them, which is exactly what the UAW does, which is exactly what the NBA does, the NFL does. That's the point of this. The point of this is to round up all the wrestlers into one pool and then monetize that pool for the Democratic Party. And he figures if he can get that done, then maybe the Democrats will help him get one of these political positions that he wants. That's the reason for this. All right? So it's bullshit.